While Baghdad's skies erupted in a wall of fire, a ghost aircraft moved silently through the chaos, ending the war before the enemy even knew it had begun. January 17, 1991. The night sky above Iraq's capital glows like daylight. Thousands of anti-aircraft artillery rounds scream upward, filling the air with a curtain of lead and flame. Radar stations sweep the darkness. Surface-to-air missile batteries stand ready. Baghdad is more heavily defended than any city in Eastern Europe. Iraq's air defense system, a state-of-the-art French-built network called Kara, connects thousands of missiles, radar installations, and guns into one coordinated brain. The fourth largest military on Earth waits, watching, ready to destroy anything that dares enter their airspace. But they're shooting blind, because somewhere in that darkness, invisible to their billion-dollar sensors, a jet unlike anything the world has ever seen is already over the city. This is the story of the F-117 Nighthawk, the jet that shouldn't have been able to fly, the weapon that was hidden from the American public for nearly a decade, the plane that changed warfare forever in a single night. To understand what happened over Baghdad, we need to go back 18 years, to a war that changed everything for the United States Air Force. October 1973, the Yom Kippur War. Israeli jets flying American-made aircraft are being shot out of the sky at an alarming rate. The culprit? Soviet surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, ground-launched weapons designed specifically to destroy aircraft. These weren't just hitting a few planes. They were systematically dismantling what was supposed to be superior air power. Modern U.S. jets built for speed and firepower were suddenly vulnerable. The realization hit American defense planners like a thunderbolt. Against Soviet defenses, the Air Force might be dead on arrival. The problem was radar. Every plane, no matter how fast or how heavily armed, showed up on enemy radar screens like a lighthouse in the fog. Once detected, missiles could lock on and fire. Speed didn't matter if the enemy saw you coming from 100 miles away. So the search began for something that seemed impossible. An airplane that radar couldn't see. Enter Lockheed's Skunk Works, the legendary secret aircraft division that had already produced the U-2 spy plane and the SR-71 Blackbird. In 1975, a mathematician working for Skunk Works made a remarkable discovery. He found an obscure paper written by a Russian scientist in the 1960s, a theoretical exploration of how electromagnetic waves behave when they hit different shapes. The Soviets had dismissed it as academically interesting, but practically useless. The American engineers saw something else entirely. The math showed that flat, angled panels could reflect radar waves away from their source, like a mirror bouncing a flashlight beam at an angle instead of back at the person holding the light. If you designed an aircraft with the right geometry, radar signals would bounce harmlessly away instead of returning to the enemy's receiver. In 1977, they built a prototype to test the theory. Engineers called it the hopeless diamond because of its bizarre, faceted shape. It looked nothing like an airplane. It looked like it could never fly. But when they tested it against radar, it vanished. The impossible had become possible. On June 18, 1981, the first F-117A Nighthawk took flight in total secrecy at a remote Nevada test site. For the next 7 years, from 1983 to 1988, this aircraft would remain one of America's most closely guarded secrets. Pilots trained only at night at the isolated Tonopah test range in Nevada. They lived double lives. During the day, they were just another Air Force officer. At night, they flew a plane the public didn't know existed, a jet so classified that even its silhouette was considered a state secret. The pilots earned a special nickname, bandits. Each one received a unique number based on when they first flew the Nighthawk. In November 1988, the Pentagon finally revealed a single grainy photograph to the world. The F-117 existed. But what it could actually do remained a mystery. That mystery would be answered 13 months later. December 1989, Operation Just Cause in Panama. Two F-117s dropped bombs near Rio Hato airfield. It was the Nighthawk's combat debut, a relatively small mission, but it proved the jet could operate in real combat conditions. The real test was yet to come. August 1990, Iraqi forces, led by Saddam Hussein, invade Kuwait. Hussein boasts of an impenetrable defense network. His Kari system represents the cutting edge of integrated air defense. Thousands of SAMs, thousands of anti-aircraft artillery pieces, all connected, all coordinated, all waiting. American military planners face a problem. To win a war against Iraq, they need to establish air superiority. But to do that, they need to destroy the Kari network. And to destroy Kari, they need to hit targets deep in the heart of Baghdad, the most heavily defended airspace on the planet. Traditional tactics would require massive numbers of aircraft, bombers to hit the targets, fighter escorts to protect the bombers, electronic warfare planes to jam enemy radar, planes specifically tasked with suppression of enemy air defenses, what the military calls SAD missions, designed to hunt down and neutralize ground-based radar and SAMs before the main strike force arrives. You might need 40 aircraft to accomplish what needed to be done. And even then, losses would be expected. Acceptable losses, the planners called them. Men and machines sacrificed to achieve the objective. Unless you had a plane, they couldn't see. January 17, 1991, Operation Desert Storm begins. As darkness falls over Saudi Arabia, F-117 Nighthawks lift off from their bases in total radio silence. No chatter, no transmissions, just the quiet roar of engines as they head north, toward the most dangerous airspace on Earth. The pilots fly through the night, navigation instruments glowing softly in their cockpits. They have no radar of their own. That might seem like a disadvantage, but it's actually critical to their survival. If they turned on a radar, it would broadcast their position like a beacon. Instead, they listen and look, using infrared cameras to see in the darkness. They talk to no one. They transmit nothing. To the Iraqi defenders watching their screens, the night is quiet, normal. Their radars sweep the darkness and see nothing unusual. Then the bombs start falling. The first targets are the brain of the Kari network itself, command centers, communication hubs, the nodes that connect Iraq's defenses into one coordinated system. F-117s appear over Baghdad and release their precision-guided bombs. These aren't the old unguided bombs that scatter across a target area. These are laser-guided weapons. The pilot uses an infrared targeting system to paint a specific point with an invisible laser beam. The bomb follows that beam with devastating accuracy. One of the most famous images of the entire Gulf War comes from this first night. Grainy infrared footage shows a laser-guided bomb entering a bunker through its ventilation shaft. A pinpoint strike, surgical precision. The kind of accuracy that was thought impossible just years before. This is the moment the world realizes war has changed. The Iraqi defenders respond the only way they can. They fire. Thousands upon thousands of anti-aircraft rounds light up the night sky. Tracer rounds create streams of light. Explosions bloom in the darkness. It looks like the sky itself is on fire. American news cameras, broadcasting live from Baghdad, capture this wall of lead, this curtain of fire reaching desperately into the darkness. But the Iraqis are shooting blind. Their radar shows them nothing. Their sensors detect nothing. They're firing at shadows, at guesses, at empty air. Meanwhile, the F-117 pilots calmly line up their crosshairs in total darkness, release their weapons, and slip away. In the first hour of the Gulf War, the F-117 destroys the command and control infrastructure that made Iraq's defenses work. Without Kari, the thousands of SAMs and artillery pieces become isolated, uncoordinated. In the hours and days that follow, non-stealth aircraft can operate with relative safety because the network that would have guided missiles to them no longer exists. One F-117, carrying just 2 bombs, accomplishes what previously required 40 aircraft. So how did stealth actually work? Let's break it down simply. The F-117 was not invisible. That's the first myth we need to shatter. Stealth, or low observable technology as engineers call it, doesn't make a plane disappear. It makes detection difficult, delayed, or in many cases impossible until it's too late to respond. Think of radar cross-section, what's abbreviated as RCS. This measures how large an object appears on a radar screen. A normal fighter jet might have an RCS the size of a small car. The F-117's RCS was roughly the size of a small bird. Not zero. Not invisible. Just incredibly, impossibly small. The Nighthawk achieved this through 3 main features, and none of them had anything to do with speed. First, shape over speed. Unlike other jets designed for velocity and maneuverability, the F-117 was slow and clunky. What made it special was faceting. Every surface of the aircraft was a flat panel set at a precise angle. When radar waves hit these panels, they bounced away from the source, just like that Russian mathematician had predicted. The radar signal scattered in every direction, except back to the enemy receiver. Second, the iron ball skin. The entire aircraft was coated in radar-absorbent material, a specialized paint containing tiny iron particles. When radar energy hit this coating, those particles absorbed the energy and converted it into heat. Not much heat, not enough to damage anything, but enough to make the radar return even smaller. Third, hidden features. The F-117 carried all weapons inside an internal bomb bay. Missiles or bombs hanging from wings create huge radar returns. The engine exhausts were designed as slits to disperse heat and hide the hot engine signature from heat-seeking missiles. Even the cockpit windows used a special metallic mesh embedded in the glass to prevent radar waves from bouncing off the instruments inside. But stealth came with serious limitations. The F-117 was aerodynamically unstable. Without 3 onboard computers constantly making micro-adjustments to the control surfaces, the plane would literally tumble out of the sky. Pilots joked that they weren't flying the aircraft. The computers were, and they were just along for the ride. Every time the pilot opened the bomb bay doors to release weapons, the smooth, radar-scattering shape was broken. For those few seconds, the aircraft became more visible. If the pilot turned too sharply, creating an angle that reflected radar back toward the source, the stealth was temporarily compromised. And then there was maintenance. The radar-absorbent coating was fragile. After every single flight, maintenance crews spent hours carefully inspecting and repairing the coating. Taping, pasting, touching up. It was a maintenance nightmare. There was another critical weakness that affected combat operations in Iraq: weather. The F-117 relied on lasers to guide its precision bombs. The pilot had to maintain a clear line of sight to the target through the infrared camera. In heavy clouds, smoke, or the massive oil fires that Saddam's forces lit across Kuwait, the laser couldn't see through to paint the target. This led to missed missions, bombs that couldn't be delivered because the conditions simply wouldn't allow it. Stealth wasn't magic. It was physics, engineering, and very specific operational conditions. But when those conditions aligned, the F-117 was devastatingly effective. Iraqi commanders never felt safe. Even in hardened underground bunkers, supposedly protected by meters of reinforced concrete, they knew that a bomb could arrive without warning. This psychological warfare was almost as important as the physical destruction. The invisible nature of the attacks created a climate of fear and uncertainty. The principle was first look, first kill. F-117 pilots saw Iraqi targets through their infrared cameras long before the enemy knew American aircraft were anywhere near. By the time a bomb hit, the Nighthawk was already leaving the area. Iraqi air defenses never got the chance to engage. Reports suggest that throughout the entire Gulf War, not a single F-117 was hit by enemy fire over Iraq. Not one. But we need to address a contested point in the F-117's history. While it remained undefeated in Iraq, one Nighthawk was shot down over Serbia in 1999, 8 years after Desert Storm. Sources differ on exactly what happened. Some experts argue it was luck, that the Serbs fired blindly and happened to connect. Others suggest they used clever tactics with old, long-wavelength radar that could detect the F-117 under certain specific conditions. The debate continues among aviation experts to this day. What's not debated is that this was the only F-117 ever lost to enemy fire. The effectiveness of the Nighthawk in Desert Storm can be measured in stark numbers. The missions F-117s flew made the rest of the air campaign possible. By destroying the Kari network in the first hours, they opened the door for conventional aircraft to operate. Non-stealth bombers could hit their targets. Fighter jets could fly escort. The air superiority that defined the Gulf War happened because the F-117 had already won the critical first battle. In 2008, the F-117 was officially retired from active combat service. The Air Force announced that newer aircraft, specifically the F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II, could perform the stealth mission more efficiently and more cheaply. The age of the Nighthawk was over. Except it wasn't. Starting in 2020 and continuing through 2026, aviation enthusiasts and military watchers began reporting something strange. F-117s were flying again across the American West. Not in museums, not in storage. Flying active missions out of Tonopah Test Range in Nevada. The same remote facility where pilots first trained in secret 40 years ago. The Air Force acknowledged what became impossible to deny. A small fleet of Nighthawks remains in what they call active retirement. These aircraft serve as aggressor trainers, simulating stealthy adversaries for F-35 and F-22 pilots to practice against. They test new sensors designed to detect low observable aircraft, representing potential Chinese or Russian threats. Reports suggest these F-117s are scheduled to continue flying training missions until at least 2034, the retired jet that isn't actually retired. The legacy of the F-117 extends far beyond its own operational history. It proved that stealth was not just possible but essential for modern air combat. It paved the way for the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, the F-22 Raptor air superiority fighter, and the F-35 Lightning II multi-role fighter. Every American stealth aircraft flying today traces its lineage back to that impossible-looking, hopeless diamond prototype and the Nighthawk that followed. The F-117 represented a paradigm shift. Before it, air defense meant detecting aircraft and shooting them down. After it, air defense meant trying to find aircraft that might not appear on your radar until they'd already completed their mission. The game changed from reaction to prevention, from tracking to guessing. Traditional air defenses didn't become obsolete overnight, but their effectiveness was severely reduced against an enemy they couldn't reliably detect. Nations around the world took note. The Russians accelerated their own stealth programs. The Chinese did the same. An arms race began, not of speed or firepower, but of invisibility. 3 final facts that often get misunderstood. The F-117 carries an F designation, leading many to assume it's a fighter. It had 0 air-to-air combat capability, no guns, no air-to-air missiles. It was strictly a bomber. The F designation was reportedly chosen to attract the best fighter pilots to the program. The F-117 was not invisible to radar. It had a very small signature. If it flew too close to certain radar installations or opened its bomb bay doors, it could be detected. The F-117 wasn't retired because it failed. It was retired because newer aircraft could perform its mission more efficiently. The Nighthawk succeeded so completely that it made itself obsolete by proving what was possible. On that night in January 1991, when Baghdad's defenders fired blindly into the darkness, they weren't just fighting an aircraft, they were fighting the future. A future where traditional defenses had to evolve or become irrelevant, where a single aircraft with 2 bombs could do what once required armadas, where the advantage went not to the fastest or the most heavily armed, but to the invisible. The F-117 Nighthawk was designed using a failed Russian math formula that the Soviets had ignored. It flew in complete secrecy for nearly a decade. It had no radar because it listened and looked, but never talked, never gave away its position. Its pilots became bandits, flying a plane that would fundamentally change warfare. And despite being retired, it continues to fly, training the next generation against the very threat it represents. The ghost aircraft that ended a war before the enemy knew it had begun proved that in modern combat, the most powerful weapon isn't always the one you can see. Sometimes it's the one you can't. If you found this story fascinating, subscribe to American Hidden Wars for more untold stories from the shadows of American military history. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And here's a question for you. Do you think stealth ended traditional air defense or just changed the game? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.